The crimson walls of the sanctuary seemed to pulse with the dying light filtering down from Murphy's tavern above, casting everything in warm amber shadows that made the white ceiling look like scattered clouds at sunset. I settled into my usual chair, watching Miguel polish glasses behind the bar with the kind of methodical precision that came from years of practice and a deep-seated need for control. The strokes last night drifted from the sound system, Julian Casablancas' voice wrapping around the room like smoke from a cigarette you couldn't quite quit. Miguel caught my eye and nodded toward the bottle of Maker's Mark, the ritual as familiar as breathing. She watched him pour, the amber liquid catching the light like liquid gold, the sound of it hitting glass a small percussion against the day's fading chaos. The first sip burned in all the right ways, warming her throat and settling in her chest like an old friend coming home. The official safety of a queer space playlist, Mom? You look like you've been through the fucking ringer today. River called from across the room, their arm wrapped around Phoenix's shoulders. Phoenix's ruby ring caught the light as they gestured. The stone River had given them months ago now worn like a talisman against the world's sharper edges. Language, dear, I replied, though my smile took any sting out of it. Some of us are trying to maintain our dignity over here. Phoenix laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Dignity went out the window when Ezra started that story about the customer who tried to return a half-eaten sandwich because it tasted too much like food. Ezra, hunched over a crossword puzzle at the bar, didn't look up. That woman was absolutely batshit insane. Who the fuck returns food for tasting like food? The conversation washed over me like a tide, familiar voices mixing with the music and the soft clink of glasses. Della emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of something that smelled like heaven and looked like art, her chef's apron splattered with evidence of the day's creative battles. Della moved between tables with the grace of someone who'd learned to read a room's mood from 20 paces, her smile genuine but professional, the kind that said she cared without getting too close. Miguel's voice cut through the ambient noise, pitched low enough that only those paying attention would hear. You know what's fucked up? I used to think the scars would bother me more. He ran a hand across his chest, the gesture unconscious but telling. Figured I'd always be self-conscious, you know? But yesterday I walked to the mailbox without a shirt and just existed. No fucking anxiety. No checking to see if anyone was staring. The room went quiet in the way it did when someone shared something real, the kind of vulnerable honesty that the sanctuary seemed to draw out of people like poison from a wound. Phoenix straightened, their attention fully focused on Miguel in that intense way they had when someone was speaking their truth. That's... Jesus, Miguel. That's everything, Phoenix said, their voice soft with recognition. I remember the first time I put on my binder. River helped me figure out how to get it on properly. And when I looked in the mirror... They paused, searching for words. It was like seeing myself for the first time. Like actually seeing me, not the person everyone else thought they were looking at. River squeezed Phoenix's shoulder, their fingers tracing gentle patterns on fabric. You cried for like 20 minutes. Happy tears, though. Like overwhelming happy tears. Phoenix's eyes were bright with the memory. I kept touching my chest, trying to convince myself it was real. That I could actually look the way I felt inside. I watched the exchange, feeling something warm and protective unfurl in my chest. These kids, though Phoenix was hardly a kid anymore at 22, they were finding themselves in ways I'd never had the language for at my age. The world was still cruel, still ready to tear us apart for daring to exist authentically, but at least they had words now. Communities, safe spaces carved out of basement bars and borrowed time. The White Stripes kicked in next, Jack White's guitar cutting through the air like broken glass made beautiful. I took another sip of whiskey, feeling the familiar burn that preceded confession. Maybe it was the music, or the way the light was hitting everyone just right, or the fact that Miguel had opened the door with his own vulnerability, but I felt words gathering in my throat like storm clouds. You want to know something pathetic? I said, my voice carrying further than I'd intended. The conversations around the room didn't stop, but I could feel attention shifting her way. I spent 2 years learning to improve my wig chai before I ever got good at wearing one on my own head. Della set down her tray and turned, eyebrows raised. That long, huh? You've told the story before, you know. Wendy, she chuckled. Ha! I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Started early into my transition, convinced I'd never to put one on my head. Bought cheap synthetic pieces from beauty supply stores, watched YouTube tutorials until my eyes bled. But I think it never looked right. I think that even still now. Today. I paused, running my fingers through my synthetic hair. Brown with red highlights, styled with hard-won expertise. Ezra had abandoned their crossword entirely, attention fixed on me with the intensity of someone who recognized a story worth hearing. Miguel kept polishing the same glass, but I could see him listening in the slight tilt of his head. What changed? Phoenix asked, their voice gentle. And I realized I was living in this fucked-up contradiction, and I was still hiding behind fear. Still convincing myself that going full-on bald and shaved with a headscarf was safer, easier, less risky. My voice cracked slightly. That night I threw out every wig I owned except one, kept it as a reminder, and decided to just go with head-covering looks. When I wear my hairpieces now, I don't do it all day even, just when I need to. So there is that, I murmured. When you need to, Wendy, River queried. Yeah, well, I was not known for good choices always, dear. I ran my fingers through my fake hair again, the gesture automatic but proud. Now I can look in the mirror and see me. Not some approximation of who I thought I should be, but actually me. The silence that followed felt full rather than empty, pregnant with recognition and shared understanding. Miguel set down his glass and poured himself a shot of something clear, downing it in one smooth motion. To figuring out who the fuck we actually are, he said, raising his empty glass in a mock toast. And to the courage to become them, Phoenix added. The moment hung there, perfect and crystalline, until the front door chimed and footsteps echoed down the stairs. I looked up to see Mrs. Chen descending, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Phoenix's body went rigid, River's arm tightening protectively around them. Renee and Sage, who'd been playing pool in the far corner, looked up with expressions that could cut steel. Mrs. Chen looked diminished. That was the only word I could find for it. Where once she'd carried herself with the rigid authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, now she seemed to fold inward, her shoulders curved like parentheses around some invisible wound. Her usual perfectly applied makeup was absent, revealing skin that looked paper-thin and exhausted. She moved carefully, like someone afraid of sudden movements. Phoenix, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Could we? Might I speak with you? The protective energy in the room was like wrought iron. Renee set down her pool cue with deliberate precision, Sage moving to flank Phoenix's other side. River's jaw clenched, their body language screaming defense. Anything you want to say to Phoenix, you can say in front of all of us, River said, their voice flat and dangerous. Mrs. Chen flinched as if she'd been struck. Yes, of course. She looked around the room, taking in the hostile faces, the protective positioning, the way everyone had stopped pretending not to watch. I know I have no right to be here. I know I have no right to ask for anything from any of you, least of all from Phoenix. Wendy, can I just talk to them, please? I am begging you. Talk all you want, ma'am, I said in a parallel motherly tone. I knew what she wanted. And honest to my feelings, if I didn't start crying a little right there, I'd been there before with Gizmo. Still do sometimes. Della appeared at Mrs. Chen's side, professional warmth masking wariness. Can I get you something? Tea, please. Whatever you have. Mrs. Chen's voice shook slightly. And, if Phoenix is willing, perhaps some of that bibimbap? The tofu kind? For both of us? Della smiled a wide grin. Oh, I'd already been told that, so I took liberties. I hope I live up to your taste expectations, Della quipped with another smile. Phoenix looked uncertain, glancing between River and their friends, clearly torn between curiosity and caution. I found herself leaning forward, recognizing something in Mrs. Chen's posture that spoke to deeper changes than simple regret. Fine, Phoenix said finally. But they're right. Whatever you want to say, everyone here gets to hear it. Mrs. Chen nodded, moving to a table near Phoenix with movements that seemed to cost her effort. Della disappeared into the kitchen, returning with tea that steamed like incense and plates of bibimbap that looked like abstract art. Colorful vegetables arranged over rice with mathematical precision, the chili sauce adding vibrant red punctuation marks. Mrs. Chen wrapped her hands around the teacup like it was an anchor. I need to tell you about these last months, she began, her voice so quiet everyone had to lean in to hear. About what's been happening at home, and why I treated you so horribly. She took a sip of tea, her hands shaking enough that the cup rattled against the saucer. He hits me, Phoenix. Your father hits me. Has been for years, but it got worse after you left. Like he needed someone to blame for losing you, and I was the closest target. The admission hit the room like a physical blow. I felt my chest tighten, recognizing the particular brand of exhaustion that comes from surviving violence. Memories of Zoe run in my ears. Around the room, expressions shifted from hostility to something more complex. Still wary, but touched with unwilling sympathy. That doesn't excuse what you did to Phoenix, Renee said, her voice hard but less cutting than before. No, Mrs. Chen agreed immediately. It doesn't. Nothing excuses that. I chose to take his anger out on our child rather than stand up to him. I chose to believe that keeping him calm was more important than keeping Phoenix safe. She set the tea down, her hands still trembling. He told me if I ever defended you, if I ever showed you any support, He described what he'd do to me. In detail. And I was so dreadfully scared, Phoenix. I am such a coward. Phoenix's face was a mask, but I could see the war happening behind their eyes. River's grip on their shoulder had gentled from protective to supportive. He broke my arm 2 weeks ago, Mrs. Chen continued, her voice barely audible now. Threw me down the stairs because I mentioned maybe visiting my sister a state away. Said I was trying to leave him, planning to abandon him like you did. She pushed up her sleeve, revealing a cast that extended from her wrist to her elbow. When I was at the hospital, this social worker, she gave me pamphlets, resources, made me realize that staying wasn't keeping anyone safe. It was just enabling him to hurt us both. The room was silent except for the soft sound of Arctic monkeys beginning to play. Alex Turner's voice wrapping around the tension like a blanket over broken glass. I'm going to leave him, Mrs. Chen said, the words seeming to cost her everything. Filing for divorce as soon as I can. Get a restraining order. I'm staying at a women's shelter downtown, learning how to exist without tiptoeing around someone's rage, because I don't really have anywhere else to go. Della set the bibimbap down in front of both of them, the act of service feeling almost ceremonial in the charged atmosphere. If you need food, Mrs. Chen, you can just come here. I will feed you. That's what kindness does, Della mused. Mrs. Chen looked at the food like she wasn't sure how to approach it. My name is Jian. She softened, tearing up. Phoenix, I know I can't undo what I did. I know I can't take back the things I said, the way I chose his comfort over your safety. But I need you to know that not a single day has passed where I haven't thought about you. I've sat outside this bar many times, just to see you walk out, with a happy face. And that is how I knew at least you were safe. Her voice broke completely then, tears streaming down her face with the force of grief held too long. Phoenix's composure finally cracked, their eyes filling with tears they fought to keep from falling. How could you, and still... Because I was a coward, Mrs. Chen said simply. Because I chose the devil I knew over the terrifying possibility of change. Because I convinced myself that keeping him happy was the same thing as keeping everyone safe, when really I was just making it easier to survive each day. She picked up her chopsticks with shaking hands, taking a small bite of the bibimbap. The chili sauce seemed to ground her, adding color back to her pale cheeks. The social worker told me something that keeps echoing in my head. She said that enabling an abuser doesn't protect anyone. It just teaches them that their behavior works. That by giving him what he wanted when he hurt me, I was essentially teaching him that hurting people gets results. Sage leaned against the pool table, arms crossed but expression softening slightly. So what do you want from Phoenix now? Mrs. Chen looked directly at Phoenix for the first time since sitting down. I want to learn how to be your mother again. Not the mother who chose fear over love, but the mother you deserve to have all along. I want to understand your life, your choices, your happiness. I want to earn back the right to worry about you, to be proud of you, to love you the way you deserve to be loved. She paused, wiping her eyes with a napkin that came away streaked with mascara. And if you're not ready for that, if you never become ready for that, I understand. But I needed you to know that leaving him wasn't just about saving myself. It was about becoming someone worthy of being your mother again. The silence stretched, filled with the weight of years of hurt and the fragile possibility of healing. I found herself holding my breath, recognizing the particular courage it took to sit in a room full of people who had every reason to hate you and lay yourself bare anyway. Phoenix reached across the table, their fingers brushing against Mrs. Chen's wrist just below the cast. I can forgive you, they said quietly, but I'm not ready for that. But I can see that you're trying to change. And that matters. It's not enough, but it's something, River added, their voice still cautious but no longer hostile. Mrs. Chen nodded, fresh tears starting. It's more than I had any right to hope for. The Arctic Monkeys song faded into something by The National, Matt Berninger's baritone adding gravitas to the moment. I watched as Phoenix and Mrs. Chen ate their bibimbap in careful, tentative bites, the act of sharing food feeling like the beginning of something fragile but real. Ezra cleared their throat, the sound cutting through the emotional atmosphere. Anyone else need another drink? Because this shit calls for serious alcohol. The comment broke the tension enough for conversations to resume, though the energy remained subdued. Thoughtful. Mrs. Chen stayed for another hour, talking quietly with Phoenix while their friends maintained protective but respectful distances. When she finally left, she hugged Phoenix carefully, like someone learning to navigate affection after years of associating touch with pain. As the night deepened, the room gradually returned to its usual rhythms. Miguel served drinks with steady hands. Della moved between tables with practiced grace, and the music continued its endless rotation through bands that understood something about the beauty in broken things. I found myself thinking about second chances, about the courage it took to change fundamental patterns, about the difference between forgiveness and understanding. Mrs. Chen's admission had stirred something in my chest. Recognition, perhaps, of how easy it was to become complicit in your own diminishment, and how fucking hard it was to choose differently. Mom? Phoenix appeared at her table, looking drained but somehow lighter than they had earlier. Thank you for not jumping in back there. I know you wanted to. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is let them handle their own shit, I said, gesturing for Phoenix to sit. How are you feeling? Phoenix considered the question, twirling River's ruby ring around their finger. Confused as hell. Angry? Hopeful? Maybe? I don't know how to feel about any of this. You don't have to know yet, I said. Healing doesn't come with a timeline or an instruction manual. You take it one day at a time, one conversation at a time, one small step toward whatever feels true. As the last customers filtered out and Miguel began the closing rituals, I gathered my things with the reluctance that came from leaving a place that felt like a sanctuary. The basement bar would be here tomorrow, ready to hold their stories and their struggles and their small victories. But tonight felt particularly precious. A reminder that change was possible, that courage came in many forms, and that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was simply show up as yourself. Walking up the stairs toward Murphy's Tavern and the street beyond, I carried with her the echo of conversations that mattered, the warmth of chosen family, and the knowledge that some spaces were sacred not because they were perfect, but because they were real. Jian was in her car across the parking lot. She looked like she was asleep. That wasn't a fight I was ready to fight yet, but it would be a fight that I would crack my knuckles for soon enough. Another soul who was just trying to survive and live. I was tired. The scars from mental cruelty can be as deep and long-lasting as wounds from punches or slaps, but are often not as obvious. In fact, even among women who have experienced violence from a partner, half or more report that the man's emotional abuse is what is causing them the greatest harm. Lundy Bancroft. Why does he do that? Inside the minds of angry and controlling men,